Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Christina McDonald.
Hi.
Christina is the USA Today bestselling author of These Still Black Waters, Do No Harm, Behind Every Lie, and The Night Olivia Fell, a Simon & Schuster Gallery books, which has been optioned for television by a major Hollywood studio. That's so exciting. We'll talk about that. Her writing has been featured in the Sunday Times, Dublin, usatoday.com, and Expedia. Originally from Seattle, Washington, she has a BA in Communications from the University of Washington and an MA in Journalism from the National University of Ireland, Galway. She now lives in London, England, with her two husbands. No, let me correct that. With her husband, 2 sons, and their dog Tango, as she's currently working on her next novel. Welcome,
That's right.
Christina.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my God, it's so fun. So Christina and I finally met for the first time in real life in June at Thriller Fest, which is
Yes.
the International Thriller Writers Conference,
Yeah.
always in New York, always the very end of May, early June, and so fun. Are you going to come back next year?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm planning on it for sure.
It's so fun. It was
Yeah.
really, really fun to get to, it's always fun to really get to hang out in person. And once you've met in person, and Christina and I had a really fun evening in a bar. We won't give too many details. There are probably pictures online if you want to check us out on Instagram.
And videos.
And videos. You can probably find those. But in the meantime, welcome. Thank you for being here. Tell
Thank
our
you.
listeners about These Still Black Waters.
So, These Still Black Waters is about a woman who has suffered a really horrifying home invasion, really traumatic home invasion. So she decides to take her teenage daughter and they escape to her childhood summer home. But the next day, a body is found in the lake behind her house. And it isn't just anybody, it isn't just any person, it's an old friend of hers. So that, of course, immediately makes the police very suspicious and they start looking into her. And the police officer, the detective who's doing that, she's suffered her own trauma and her own tragedy and has her own past as well. And that starts to conflict with my other protagonist. Yeah.
Okay, well, so I noticed this is a Jess Lambert thriller, which I know in the world of books means there's probably another one coming, which I love.
Yeah.
So this is the start of a series. So tell us about Jess, because she's actually got a really intense and difficult backstory, and she makes for a really interesting character. So tell us about her.
Yeah. Jess is maybe one of my favorite characters I've ever written. She's really, really devastated after a tragedy in her past, but she's so strong as well. Like, she's been physically and emotionally injured and scarred, and she uses a cane. She is, disabled, and she has this emotional scarring on her, but she's so strong and she's determined to take what happened and use it for better and to help solve these crimes. And I can't really say much more than that without giving away some of the things in the book, but she's a very strong, badass detective, and I love her.
She totally is too. I know. So we can say, though, we talked about this a little bit beforehand, that her daughter passed away, and it was
in a car accident.
In a car accident. So Jess now rides a motorcycle because getting in a car is terrifying.
It's terrifying.
Which makes total sense. Although, of course, the rational part of us knows that you're probably in more danger in a motorcycle, or on a motorcycle. But one of the things that happens to her in this incredible grief is that she hears Isla. Is that Isla? How do you pronounce it?
Isla.
Oh. Yeah. See, with all these Irish names that I'm going to butcher. She sees and hears her daughter.
So she believes she's seeing and hearing her daughter. And actually, when I was researching more about bereavement and grief while I was writing this story, I found out that that's actually really common. Psychologists do say that when you are so devastated by a loss, especially auditory hallucinations. People do hear and think they see in passing, or just in the back of their mind, they think they see their loved one. And so there's that kind of, that Jess is a bit torn, like, is she really seeing Isla, because it feels so real, this presence of her dead daughter, or this trauma that's happened to her, and she's having these hallucinatory visions of her daughter, which is what her grief therapist tells her is happening, because it is quite common to happen.
Right. And it's, I mean, it's kind of interesting because I think she feels, in some ways, of course, you can imagine, as we're mothers, right? If you can see and hear your child who's gone, you don't want to let that go. And yet part of her wonders if, like if that's part of a brain injury. In fact, she signed up for an MRI to make sure that, because she was in the accident, to make sure that there's not a residual injury. And you can see her almost, of course, in some ways she'd be reassured if it was a brain injury, but in some ways also she'd be devastated if it was a brain injury.
Because she doesn't want to let go, but she needs to let go. And there's that tension between want and need. And that's what we writers are always trying to find, right? So that internal want versus need with Jess is, I found really compelling to write, because there is that tension. And it's like, well, she needs to let go and but that's hard. And so doing that means saying goodbye. And does she really want to do that?
Right. And I think
we explored a bit more in book 2, because you're right, it is a series, and Jess does go to solve more crimes. And that is still going on.
I love that. So tell us, I'm always curious to know how authors come up with sort of the seeds of their stories. Do you, where did Jess come from? Like, was it the exploration of this sort of phenomenon of, grief and its hallucinations, or was that a byproduct or something else? Tell us that.
It was a byproduct, actually. So the story I first wrote almost entirely from Neve's point of view. And that came about because I was having lunch with a friend of mine who had in fact suffered a really horrific home invasion. And I hadn't seen her in a while, and I had wondered, how was she doing? But, you get busy with life and kids and work. And so I figured she would reach out when she was ready. And then she did. And so we sat down for lunch, and she told me that she'd suffered this really horrifying home invasion. She was putting her children down to bed at nighttime, and her door was broken down by masked intruders, and they came in and they threatened her with a knife while her children were in bed. And that just really stuck with me. And I was like,
of course,
like, that's so horrifying and so terrifying. And then, the way it is with kind of a seed of a story, it just sort of stuck in my mind, and it grew and it grew. And then this was then the pandemic happened, and during the pandemic, everything felt really strange, really upside down, and I started thinking about it more and more, and what that would mean if that happened, and if nothing was really the way you thought that it was. And there was such fear and sadness and grief during the pandemic, so that's a very strong theme in the book as well.
Yes.
And I think These Still Black Waters, it really speaks to the rupture that tragedy brings in our lives, for being the pandemic or being the loss of a loved one, and about our endless quest to put our lives back together, and how resilient we humans are.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because there's also like one of the wonderful things you explore in the book with both Neve and Neve is the woman who suffers the home invasion, which probably people got, Jess is the idea of how isolating grief is, right? Like, you are even like, even with each of them is married, but the tragedy creates this, it creates a natural rift in the marriage, and people deal with grief very differently. So we know this from the statistics about these kinds of things, that oftentimes, particularly the loss of a child leads to the end of the marriage, right? Because it's impossible to it's impossible to sort of to get past that. And then there's the guilt. If Jess was driving, and it's all that stuff that, even though there was a deer, it wasn't as though she was, anyway, but it is the idea. And the pandemic was the same, right? We were all of us so isolated in a weird sort of grief.
We were all just kind of marooned on our own little islands, and that's why I like the name Isla, is because it's Spanish for island. And it's like Isla, we're all just, we felt so isolated and alone, and that's how grief makes us feel as well. And so that's sort of how the book started, is through Neve's point of view. And Jess was she was a secondary character who I adored, but she was in third person, and she was much more just the detective who was investigating. And when I sold my genius editor was like, let's make this into a series and let's make Jess primary protagonist. And I was like, okay, cool. So then I really delved into Jess and her backstory and her feelings and emotions. And I think that's where that richness of this character comes from, is because I made her a primary protagonist rather than a secondary. But initially the story was told from Neve's point of view almost entirely.
Interesting.
So it really changed in edits.
Yeah, well, which happens. I worked with Thomas and Mercer and had to, pull books apart, so I know exactly what you've gone through. And we do that. That's kind of the path, right? You write a book you think is perfect, and then you send it to the editor, and they have a way to make it even better. So that's our job.
Great. I don't know how they do it, honestly.
I know their brains work really differently. So, and I know that, like, I read Do Not Harm, which is another earlier of your books, and that too is about, there's a huge portion of being a mother and, the sort of things we will do for our children in that book as well. So tell me, like, what sort of drives you to write about the things you write about? I think everybody has a different reason. All authors have a different reason that stories they're drawn to certain types of stories.
Yeah. For me, I never really set out to write a book that's like about a mother or mothers and daughters or anything like that. I don't set out to do that. I think just during the process of writing is very personal for me. So like Do No Harm, for example, was, about a woman who was trying to save her son's life, who was very ill. And amidst the opioid pandemic, as a doctor, she had access to opioids. So she started selling them. And is that right or wrong? Doing the wrong thing, but for the right reason. And I could relate so much as a mother, how far I would go for my child. And so I think I was just pouring myself into that book. And then the same happened with this book and all of my books, really. I pour so much of myself into it, that maybe it's a bit, every book is a little bit personal, or maybe a lot personal. Right. And so those are the stories, like, the story of my friend who I was out to lunch with, and her putting her children to bed and then having, being confronted with masked intruders, like that really got me, because I could imagine it very realistically happening while I'm putting my own children to bed. And so when I can do that, then that pours into my writing, and it makes it just more, I suppose, vivid and emotional in a way. And maybe a lot of that does come from me being a mother. So,
I mean, we can't extract who we are from our writing, right? I mean, I think that's part of it, right? It's not you, but it's you. And I also think probably there's some, as you said, like, it's a way of working through something that is kind of the worst possible thing, right?
Yeah.
We're like thinking nothing would be worse than that moment when you and your children are at risk. So there's,
we're all fighting our own monsters, right?
Right. And I actually think that, people talk about, like, I mean, I know, like, my daughter will watch all, these shows. She's 23 and she'll watch the dark TV shows. And for me, I'm like, I kind of get enough of that in my brain, right? Like my brain is always working through, like, oh God, what this terrible thing happened? What if this terrible thing happened? So I do think it's a way of sort of maybe soothing the fear
confronting it in a way. For sure. And I think you're right that, like, these characters we create are not us, and they're not even a reflection of our own minds. Like, I can create characters like Emma and Do No Harm, who I really actually disagree with, but the theme of the book and how that is explored is usually quite personal to me.
Right. Makes total sense. So you, I know you're also raising kids. How do you sort of structure your writing life? I mean, it's hard in the summer, I imagine, but now that everyone's back to school.
Yeah. In the summer, I don't get a lot of writing done. If I do get any writing done, I usually have to wake up quite early to do that, which I hate. I'm not a morning person, but I will if I'm on like a deadline or whatever.
Right.
I'll get up at 5 a.m. with my cup of tea and a cozy blanket if it's cold, and I will do my work until the boys get up. But during the school year, like right now, I Usually we take them to school in the mornings. My husband takes them in the morning and I pick them up in the evening. And actually just my youngest, because my oldest, he's in secondary school now, so he can walk to school and he kind of sorts himself out a little bit better now. But my littlest, he's only 9, so we drive him to school. My husband drives him in the morning and I get to work. And then when my husband gets home, we have a coffee date every single morning.
I
which
love
is
that.
lovely. Yeah. And we've had this espresso machine that we bought as a gift to ourselves when my second baby was born. When our second baby was born, and we were like, we're going to be really tired. Let's get an espresso machine.
I love it. I love
We're
it.
using it. It's amazing. So yeah, so we make ourselves a coffee and we have our coffee and we like just, I don't know, talk and connect for half an hour, 15 minutes every single morning. And then I go back up to work and he goes to work as well. We both work from home, so we're able to be quite flexible with the kids. And then I pick my son up at 4 from school. So I usually sign off at 3:30. And then in the evenings, I'll do social media stuff once they're in bed and stuff. But the writing itself is during the day and really only when they're at school. So I'm not one of these authors who can get up on a Saturday or a Sunday and work those days as well, because I have kids and they have clubs and birthday parties and homework. So I work Monday
Exactly.
to Friday, you know, and here in the UK, it's different in America, but in the UK, they only get 6 weeks of summer vacation, not
I
3 months.
know. Yeah.
So, and then they get, 2 weeks for half term here, 2 weeks for half term. They're constantly getting 2 weeks off. And that
Yeah.
means that I can write for 6 weeks and then I get 2 weeks off. And it's difficult to juggle it sometimes, but I think
Yeah.
it's nice as well that I can have that balance and be there for them and, pick them up from school. And yeah, it works for us right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not, I mean, it's important to have that time with them. And I think
Yeah.
this is, if you can get it's the button chair, right? You got to like, no, this is my time. I got to get my butt in the chair. I got to work
Yep.
while I can. And
Yeah, exactly.
so
Utilize that time.
I see the sticky notes on your wall
Oh,
behind you. So I was going to ask
that's
about,
why.
is that your next book?
No, that is how I edit.
Okay, well, tell us about. I want to I want to hear about how you write. Like,
Yeah.
do you plan out your story? Are you? I mean, there's the plotter and the pantser, sort of the
Yeah.
extremes, but everybody's sort of a combination of some. So how do stories happen for you?
I'm pretty much purely a pantser. I mean,
Yeah,
I
me
do
too.
I do have always at least some sort of idea of what it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be about, but it's quite vague.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe 2 sentences. This happens and then this happens. Like, so basically that inciting incident and maybe the first plot point. And
Mm-hmm.
then and I always get what this is so woo woo and I hate even telling people about it, but
I
this
love
is
it.
me. I get what is called the aura of a story. I call it the aura of a story.
I love
And
it.
basically it's like I have this feeling, this kind of just vague feeling that descends on me, and it's half excitement and half fear and
Mm-hmm.
half like trepidation. And when that descends on me, and it's about a particular story idea, I just start writing, and I don't really worry about edits. I don't like think about character development. I don't think about any of that. I just think about plot, and I write and write and write, and usually I get about maybe 25% through, so like the first plot point. And then it starts to get a bit trickier after that, where I have to kind of think back and go, okay, now do I have these characters? Are they who I want them to be? Am I putting them into the worst situation possible? Am I torturing them enough?
Right. Totally.
And then, yeah, and then eventually, I get to the 50% mark and the 75% mark and all of that stuff. That's all about just showing up, right? It's just
Mhm.
about getting in the chair every day and writing some words, and eventually it's drops in the ocean, right? So eventually I will get to my 80,000-90,000 words and have a very rough draft, and once I
Yeah.
have that very rough draft, I can read through it again and kind of go, I'm not hitting this beat here, or this character needs to develop more, and that's when I get these sticky notes out and
Okay.
I start writing on them and just trying to make sure. And as I'm kind of writing or reading through, I'll glance back, and yeah, so it's very unscientific, but that's how I
I mean, I think so. I mean, so much of this is unscientific, and I love
yeah.
the aura of a story because I think there is, and I think woo woo is awesome. I, in fact, for the last few days, I've had a smoky quartz crystal in my bra. So you don't need to worry about
Okay, good.
woo woo and me. We are really good friends. So,
All right.
and then do you do that revision? So do you feel like, do you have a beta reader who sort of goes through that first draft with you? You do all of that on your own and then send it in?
All of it on my own. And then if the book has been optioned already, like my second book for These Still Black Waters, the second book in the series, had already been optioned. So I just sent it directly into my editor. But if a book hasn't been optioned, then I will send it out to my agent and just make sure that they're happy to send it on submission, because ultimately they're the ones that have to send it out. So it depends on where I am in the submission process. And, you know, if it's a 2-book deal or a 1-book deal or whatever, it just depends. But mostly it's just up to me and my gut feeling. And I feel like it's good and I'm happy enough, and I can imagine a reader reading it and I'm proud enough of my work that I'm ready to do that, then I'll do that. But I don't use beta readers, and I know a lot of people do, and that's fantastic. But for me, I feel like reading is so subjective that I could get one beta reader saying one thing and another beta reader saying something completely contrary to that, and I don't know who to believe. So then that makes me myself. So I just learned to kind of just trust my gut and just go like, I love this story. Hopefully others do too, you know?
What do you feel like, what's the time, like how much time does it take you then, do you feel like, from the sort of, well, because obviously the seed of the story, well, this story started a long time ago, but in general, but as you start to sort of, you know, amalgamate these ideas and sit down to the point where you have a solid, you feel comfortable with first draft, what's the, you know, what kind of period is that?
It depends on every book. They're all a little bit different, but so every book I've previously written, These Still Black Waters took 4 months, Do No Harm took 3 months to the day. And that's just for like a first draft, rough first draft. Because I don't plot, I'm a pantser. That's basically my outline, you know? So it takes 3 months to kind of get that story down. But that being said, my most recent book, which is the next in the series, that took me 6 months to write. I mean, I've never written a series book before, and trying to learn that and make my characters unique and fresh and compelling, that was really difficult to me. And it took me a lot of false starts to actually, I knew what the story was going to be about. It was more about like, how do the characters react to this story and how is that going to work? So it was the characters and Jess, especially because I love her so much and I want to make sure that she's fresh and compelling and still like take some of the great bits of, you know, the first book into the second book. And that is really, really tricky, I found.
That is interesting because I think it is, I mean, there's some really lovely things about writing a series, right? Because you have the same, you know, characters, and my dogs are, they're like, oh, we want to be part of this. But anyway, that, I mean, that is, I've, you know, for a long time, it was what I wrote with series. So it is, and you kind of get this like lovely world you get to go back to, because you have Jess, and you also have her partner, Will, who's lovely. And, you know, and her lieutenant, we see a little bit, and obviously her husband, Mac.
And Lake, I love the town as well. And I love all of that. But just keeping it fresh.
And do you feel like that'll get, I mean, now that you've done you're in the process of doing 2, or you're probably close to being done with that second draft. What do you know, do you feel like it'll get easier?
I mean, I hope so. I don't know if writing ever gets easier, does it? I don't know.
That's
I kind of thought it would with time, but I think like each book, I put more pressure on myself, and I want more, and I expect more, and I want the readers to be satisfied as well. And so maybe each book, because there's a little bit more pressure, it feels a little bit more difficult, but I love it even more, if that makes any sense. Like, you know, I love These Still Black Waters, but I also really love the sequel, and the next in the series, and I'm so excited for people to read that too. And I've just turned in my finished edits, so it's definitely coming out. It's coming out next year, August 2024. But will it make writing a third one easier? I don't know. I'd say it'll still be tricky, because you're still always challenging yourself to find, you know, fresh things from an old character, and that's tricky. you know?
And creating a sort of an arc in each book, right?
Yeah.
Like the character
Yeah.
has to grow in each book, but then they have to change over the course of the
Over the
series.
yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of, and especially when you come into it, like I think the thing people don't always recognize is that you don't know if this is going to be a 3-book series or a 10-book
Yeah.
series. Like, you just have to sort of
Yes.
like leave it open, but also,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
it's
So I don't know how
really,
to end the second one because, I have a 2-book deal. It's for 2 in the series, and we'll see if they do well and people love them. Well, then I'll write a 3rd book, but I don't know at
Mhm.
this point in time. So I have to just leave things slightly open, and we'll see. But that
it
does make it
is.
challenging for writing for sure.
It's so tricky. So now that
Yeah.
you're done, so this is another interesting thing for people who sort of, aren't writers or aren't published writers. You now that you finish, right? You have this August 2024 book that's done. That's done. You just turned in your final edits. So you have now this opening, right? And I
Yeah.
imagine, what are you going to start book 3? Do you try to think of something different? What do you do? It's so
Right
hard.
now, yeah, it's really hard. Right now, I'm trying to sort out, publication of These Still Black Waters is coming up in only a few weeks. So I'm trying to get sorted out with that and do interviews for that. And then, write articles for that and just really go into launch mode, right? Like just to get
Hmm.
that launched. And once that is launched, then I will reassess where we are and what I should do, if I should start immediately on book 3 or if I should try
Hmm.
another standalone first. I don't know. Um, yeah,
Hmm.
I have to wait for
It's
the story aura to descend upon me.
it's tricky. Well, also congratulations because this was a Amazon first read.
Yeah,
Is that what they call them? Prime,
that's what it's called. Yeah, yeah, first read.
Amazon first read, which
Yeah,
means, for those who don't know, that this book actually is free to Amazon Prime members for the whole month
yeah,
of September. And
yeah.
actually, our show airs on September 28th. So even though
Oh,
the official launch date for your book is October 1st, people can still grab it.
yeah.
If you're a Kindle Prime member, you can read it.
Free.
Or Kindle Unlimited. No, an Amazon Prime member, you can read it.
Yeah, Amazon Prime. They can read it for free for a few more days.
It's
But,
just so fun.
for a paperback, and actually there is a giveaway through the end of the month on Goodreads. So
Oh,
20 paperbacks there. So ebook, paperback, whatever, you have a
however you,
chance.
however you want to read this book, it's available. It's for your hot little hands, and they did a
Yeah.
beautiful job. I have to say, I give them so much
Oh,
credit for the
love this one.
covers. Are gorgeous. I mean, they really just did such a great job. I love,
Yeah.
love, love it. And you've obviously got the final version, but I've got this beautiful one, and they really did a fabulous job. So,
Yeah, they
do you
really
have a
did.
do you have a working title for the second one?
Yeah, the title has been confirmed. It's called What Lies in Darkness.
Oh, I love
Mhm.
that. I love
Yeah.
that. Well, this is super exciting. And okay, tell
Thank
us a
you.
little bit about where to find you in all the places, and also because you do have a really nice backlist.
Yeah.
So where should people check out all your books
Yeah.
and you on social media so they can hunt for the video of us at the bar and all that good stuff?
Oh, yeah. Right. So the best place to find all of my books, my backlist, is on my website, and that is Christina-McDonald.com. And I also have a book club that I have there. So I have a book club pick every month, and I make book recommendations, and I talk a bit about what I'm doing as well, but also about other books out there that I'm loving. And
I love
and
that.
I make one book, my book club pick for the month. I do a giveaway of that as well. And you can just go straight to my website and then go to book club and click join, and you'll be signed up. And
Fun.
anyone who's joined, they automatically are entitled to win that giveaway each month. So they're automatically entered.
So
On
fun.
social media, you can find me on all the normal places. Instagram, I'm Christina Max at Christina Max 79. On Twitter, same thing. And then on TikTok, I don't really post a lot on TikTok, I'll be honest.
I
But
know
I'm also
that
on Facebook.
it's tricky. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what to. I'm not one of those authors who's like dancing and pointing and
No.
stuff, and I just don't
But
know what to do
actually,
with it. So,
I have seen you. You could
yes,
be.
I've
You
just gotten over
absolutely,
there.
you just could be. So maybe we just need to we need more lessons from Geneva. Geneva Rose is
Yeah. Oh,
our
she's fantastic. But
she's
on
fantastic.
Facebook, I'm there quite a lot as well, and that's Christina McDonald, author.
Okay.
You can
Fantastic.
find
Well, and we will have a copy of the Still Black Waters to give away
right.
coming up very soon. And check out Christina-McDonald.com, and that's and McDonald is the normal way. No A in the MAC, just
MCD.
MC. Yeah, MC. I'm
MC.
learning a lot about this actually, that even in all caps, the C is always little.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I
That's
don't really mind.
interesting.
You can capitalize the.
I
It's
think
fine.
I might have, but I'm just saying, I'm like, oh, I probably should be paying more attention to these because, this is like the proper spelling. That Mac thing, it always throws me for a loop. But
I think
it
Jack
was,
is the Scottish and Mick is the Irish. That's what I heard.
oh, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so this
Yeah.
is Irish. So you're Irish. This is an Irish name.
Yeah. From far long back, many generations back.
Wow, it
Yeah.
works. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, this was as I told I told Christina before we started. I was up. You can almost tell that I was up late last night because I had kind of a crazy week, and I ended up just like, I was going to get up early, but then I was like, nope, and I just flew through the end of this book. I really, really loved it. Lots
Thank
of
you.
fun twists we're not going to talk about, but I think people will really love Jess and Neve, and I can't wait to read What Lies in Darkness.
I know. I'll give you an early copy.
It's lucky me. So thank you so much, Christina, for
Thank you
joining us
for having me.
today. Oh,
It's really
absolutely.
nice to see you and to chat and just talk about my book. I'm really excited for everybody to read it. And
I know, and I
it's
noticed it was you were up in the top 25 or 30 on
10.
I
Got
mean
up to 10,
10
number 10. The bestseller list. I was really excited. And it stayed there for
number
2
10.
days. Number 10, yeah.
Number 10 in the
Really
whole
excited.
store. That is
Yeah.
amazing. That's
Yeah.
really well, congratulations. I was
Thank you.
watching you when you were in the 20s, but I love that you made it all the way to 10. Congratulations, Christina.
Thank
You
you so
for
much.
joining us. And
Thank you. Thanks, Danielle.
everybody for joining us today. Thank you. This is Danielle with Christina McDonald, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.